Welcome to the G20 Interfaith Podcast, a platform where we explore the intersection of faith, global challenges, and policy.
Welcome to another episode of the G20 Interfaith Forum podcast. My name is Stuart Bird.
I'm Mariana Richardson.
And today we are delighted to be joined by Dr. Elizabeta Kitanovic-Broes. Elizabeta, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for welcoming me.
We are so excited to have Elizabeta with us. I've known Elizabeta for about 7 years, and I do want to give a little background because she's such an amazing person and force for good, especially in Europe. Dr. Elizabeta Kitanovic-Broes is the CEO and founder of the Facta Human Rights Institute based in Belgium since 2025. She has over 20 years of professional experience in human rights advocacy, research, and education. The establishment of the FELHRI is grounded in a holistic understanding of the protection of the inherent human dignity of all persons. She's also a teacher, and she teaches at the Orthodox Institute Apostle Paul in Brussels on a course of ecumenism and Christian confession since 2013. And then also from 2020 to 2026, Dr. Kitanovic served as a professor of human rights law at the Faculty of Protestant Theology and Religious Studies. And then between 2007 and 2025, like I said, she's a busy woman. She worked as program staff for advocacy and dialogue at the Conference of European Churches, with a focus on human rights, freedom of religion or belief. In this role, she led the development of the conference's advocacy and human rights education initiatives and edited 6 key educational and policy resources. Dr. Kitanovic holds degrees in Orthodox Christian theology, political science from the University of Belgrade. She regularly lectures and conducts research on human rights, freedom of religion or belief, religious radicalization and security, environmental rights and sustainability, and interreligious and intercultural dialogue. She serves as an advisor to AI and Faith in Utah since 2026, a senior partner at Lead Integrity in New York since 2025, a member of the Advisory Council of the International Academy of Multicultural Cooperation in New York since 2025, and has been a member of G20 Interfaith Forum Advisory Council since 2014. So we have a long and wonderful opportunity to have Elizabeta be a part of IF20 since its beginning. So I wanted to ask you, Elizabeta, you founded, of course, this Facta Human Rights Institute. What led you to start this NGO and what's its purpose?
Well, thank you, Mariana, for this great introduction. And thank you, Stuart, as well, for organizing and taking care that this webinar goes smoothly. Facta Human Rights Institute is an independent institute which is based here in Belgium, in Flanders. And it is dedicated to strengthen democracy, human rights, and rule of law in Europe and beyond. And it is guided by universal values and international standards, and where we work actually to promote open, inclusive, and resilient societies where fundamental rights are respected and protected for all. So basically, that is the purpose, and our work it's very much rooted in the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, as well as other international human rights instruments and mechanisms. We believe that in respect for human dignity requires recognizing the equal worth of all people across differences of different cultures, beliefs, convictions. And what the vision of the Institute was to create space for a dialogue granted on the mutual respect, but also where we have the space to have meaningful conversations about human rights, because human rights also, it's, people and institutions have very much a different understanding of human rights. And of course, sometimes we need in-depth conversations, that we can had better understanding of different different interpretations of the concept of universality of human rights. Even though we talk, everybody are talking in the human rights, let's say, world about universality of human rights, still there are different interpretations and different understanding. What do we mean by it? When do we mean by it? When it applies and when it don't. That's why we were thinking in our institute to provide high quality tailor-made training and capacity building programs for various stakeholders, for the civil society, for religion and belief institutions, policymakers, school, media, youth, academia, private and public sector, everyone who wants to improve their knowledge and understanding of human rights principles. And of course, we have the space where human rights-based dialogue can occur in fostering, let's say, mutual understanding and cooperation among the differences. And that's not easy. That is very difficult social engineering, where that we are interested actually to be part of, but using human rights-based approach when dealing with societal problems. Also, we are encouraging open exchange and attentive listening, because listening is also a big part of the problem. Not only sometimes we have defense of the interest or advocacy for certain interest and so on, but it's very important if we want to bring two sides into the dialogue to listen very, very carefully different positions, which are very often shaped by different economic, social, educational grounding, either around individuals or around the communities. And of course, in addition to the training and dialogue, we conduct also monitoring and advocacy on human rights law, also rule of law, and of course, we refer to the all international organizations like United Nations, Council of Europe, OSCE, European Union, G20, World Bank, and other international organizations dealing with human rights.
Thank you for explaining the purpose behind Facta est Lus. I can totally see why it would be beneficial, as there is a gap in between understanding that we need human rights, but then actually implementing human rights. I love what your website says. On the Institute's website, it says human dignity is non-negotiable. It constitutes the foundation of all human rights. Yet, too often, a gap persists between constitutional guarantees and lived realities. Facta est Lus Human Rights Institute works to close this gap by advancing, promoting, protecting, and supporting the implementation of universally recognized human rights. And so it's just like you said, human rights are universally recognized, but are they being implemented correctly?
Yes, well, the point is that the purpose of the Institute is to help people understanding the rights from the legal point of view. But of course, when we talk about rights, we have duties and responsibilities. So we don't have just fundamental freedoms, but we also, as a citizens, we have certain duties, yeah, as a users of these rights. And usually every constitution is guaranteeing the certain level of rights. In some countries, it is these freedoms are let's say on the better level, and we have countries with a very high democratic index. Some countries, they have a little bit less because of the implementation of human rights, and we have sometimes dictatorship regimes which are limiting fundamental rights. But also we could see, for example, that during pandemic, we had limitation of certain rights because we have also certain, let's say, developments in society when the fundamental rights can be limited by the state. You know, if there is an issue of public security, public moral, then a coup d'etat, then public health, like it was an issue, anything which endangers like the nation, the entire population, the state can limit fundamental rights. But of course, the essence of the Institute is actually protection of human dignity. We have seen when we read Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and that is something which is really, really beautiful, said in the Universal Declaration, the emphasis how much we have to respect human dignity. And that means actually respecting every single person. Sometimes, of course, we see if people would do that, like, and relate to each other in kindness and appreciation and respect of dignity of the other person, we would not need any laws. Like, if we would not need human rights law, we would not need any international instruments and mechanism. But that is not the case. And that's why, I mean, if we go to Europe, we had Shoah in the European history, which is one of the worst things that it happened in European history. And these things, we saw what humans can do to humans. And to prevent things ever happening again, we have all these sets of international laws which are recognized by the states, and where the states are obliged, mandatory, those signatory states of different protocols and conventions. For example, from the EU point of view, the EU member states who are bound by the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, they need to respect it and to implement it. But of course, we see also in today's politics and international relations that is quite very difficult. So some institutions that we were hoping that they are going to be the guardian of fundamental rights, in the current climate that we all see on the TV, are not responding to the level that is required by the law, by their own laws, by their own understanding of the of human rights. And we can witness this politicization and instrumentalization already more than in a decade, in the getting very, very strong stream. Therefore, I think the vision of Facta looks is to remind people that actually these rights needs to be upheld by everybody. And everybody, I think, should be advocates for rights not on their own, but also of the rights of the others. Because like that, if we protect each other from each other and towards each other, then I think we can create better society. That's why it's not negotiable.
I agree 100% with your statements. Matter of fact, when you talk about the UDHR, I think about Article 18. And specifically, a lot of your work has been the idea of human rights and freedom of religion, and putting those two together in terms of some of the amazing work that you've done. Elizabeta, I would love for you to talk about how the Institute is also dealing with human dignity and freedom of religion and belief.
Well, Facta looks, Human Rights Institute is actually monitoring in the current climate, freedom of religion or belief, and actually the what will happen with the position of the European Union Special Envoy on promotion on freedom of religion or belief outside of the EU. So at the moment, we are monitoring these kind of developments because this reappointment was supposed to be scheduled like early of 2026 after Baron Frans van Dalen, after his term was finished. And of course, there was lots of calling by different stakeholders in the EU, different NGOs, religion and belief and secular, to have a new appointment of the for this post. And the mandate, it's focusing on the protection of religious minorities and fostering dialogue, and calls for a demanding and transparent selection process. That's also something that now somehow, when we were talking before in the EU freedom of religion and belief, it was somehow regarded that more faith-based organizations are interested in this post. But now what is wonderful, it is also that the secular society is also interested in this post, because this is the right of freedom of religion and belief. So we must not forget that there are also other stakeholders who are also having an interest to have this appointment, which is great because it makes bigger pressure on the European Union actually to make faster the appointment of the person. But then there is an issue. Following this mandate, there was a group of the MEPs, and this is something that we have been monitoring very closely, led by Greens Daniel Freund and Sirpa Pietikäinen, so two MEPs. They actually addressed their concerns to the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and to the Commissioner Magnus Brunner, who is responsible for the EU Special Envoy. And they actually urge both commissioners and actually the president of the commission and Commissioner Magnus Brunner to actually select the candidate who would actually respect freedom of religion or belief in relationship to other fundamental rights without distinction. Yeah, without being just selective to this right and then limiting the other rights. And I found one text from Daniel Freud from December 2025, when he said, like, freedom of religion or belief is fundamental rights, but it cannot be weaponized to justify discrimination. We are urging the Commission to ensure that the next envoy has a proven track record of defending human rights for all, including religious minorities, atheists, and those often targeted in the name of religion. We cannot have envoy who is selective about which human rights should choose to respect. You see, and we can see just by this very, very interesting statement that actually this understanding of freedom of religion and belief, it's still not yet developed. 2026, yeah, we have very nice Charter of Fundamental Rights, but we can see how it's very difficult to go through the institutional streams to get the right understanding of freedom of religion or belief. This is something that at the beginning I was talking about, having different perspectives on universalities, but very much so we have also different perspectives on freedom of religion or belief. And again, what it's also new, and it's very also good news on the level of the European Union that we have been also monitoring, is that the EU Fundamental Rights Agency, which is based in Vienna, actually opened its office headquarters here their office here in Brussels. And I remember for years, civil society was really pleading, because having the EU Fundamental Rights Agency far away from the European Union, from actually the whole decision-making process and the presidents and possibilities for the advocacy, was a little bit strange why this Fundamental Rights Agency is there and not in Brussels, because it is so fundamental for the value-based approach in the economic and trade agreements of the European Union. And of course, this is great news from perspective that the EU Fundamental Rights Agency is dealing with fundamental rights and the freedoms inside of the European Union. You see, European Union doesn't have such a big, it has, let's say, long-standing practice to deal with human rights, religious freedom outside of the EU. But what about inside? So we can see actually that it's very difficult for the EU member states that when they need to be self-critical or critical of one another, it's get a little bit difficult to recognize that not everything is also perfect, because sometimes I have impression that people who are living outside of the European Union, by this very strong promotion about the values and the ethics of the European Union, that this is some perfect institution implementing perfect by the book human rights and fundamental freedoms. But actually, it's not the case, and that is very disappointing. And it's very disappointing, especially when we have the migrants, refugees, asylum seekers. You know, when they are when we have the influx here in the European Union, when they find the shooting on the borders, when they don't find the good welcome, when they find out the poor conditions, then they understand, but these fundamental rights, like what the EU is saying and actually how it is in reality, there is big discrepancy between the theory and practice. You see, and there is big disappointment. And I think that this disappointment is there because simply in the EU, we are not talking enough about the state of fundamental rights in the EU member states. So I think that with this new office of the EU Fundamental Rights Agency and their amazing scientific reports that they have, the state of, let's say, decision-making processes based on human rights inside of the European Union are going to have certain impact in the future.
It's inspiring to hear how there are efforts being made toward human rights and religious freedom and belief, both combining religious communities with secular communities, and also the moving of the Human Rights Agency into Brussels. We now want to ask you about AI and new technology. So, how is artificial intelligence and new technology impacting human rights and religious freedom in the EU?
Thanks, Stuart, for this very interesting question, because one of the vision that I have for the Facta Human Rights Institute is actually to go and explore and do more studies and discussions on exactly these questions, AI and human rights. And from the following reason, that artificial intelligence is increasingly involved in decision-making processes that affect employment, access to services, education, governance, and so on. And because of this, AI, it's not longer simply one technological issue, but it becomes also human rights issue. And in the European Union, we have the EU AI Act. And of course, on the other hand, we have, again, the Charter of Fundamental Rights. So the aim is to ensure that AI systems respect human dignity, respect transparency, accountability, and human oversight. However, the AI systems can still pose risk when automatized with the decision-making processes, when they reduce individuals to data profiles or behavioral patterns. So there we have to be very, very cautious. So I understand that people who are following technological development, of course, they are improving and looking for the new patterns and new amelioration of the technology that it's currently presented to us. But as human rights defenders, we need to look also how what is the impact of the new technologies on human dignity, that actually technology serves to people and not people to technology, so not other way around. So the core challenge is to ensure that technology supports human autonomy rather than replacing human judgment. And human rights law therefore plays a crucial role in maintaining the principle that technology must remain subordinate to dignity and freedom of human persons. So this is basically that is basically the idea that we are discussing in our institute, and how AI affects religious freedom. Also, AI can indirectly affect religious freedom in several ways. So we were just discussing one project and where we saw actually how technological systems may reshape social and cultural environment in ways to limit the autonomy of religious communities. Second, some technologies may conflict with religious and ethical convictions. In such cases, religious individuals and communities must retain the right to conscientious refusal, meaning the freedom not to adopt certain technologies that compromise their beliefs or spiritual practices. Third, if AI systems begin to replace human roles in areas involving ethical or spiritual guidance, they can undermine religious traditions that emphasize human discernment, responsibility, and community relationship. Also, we have been looking on artificial intelligence in a relationship to children, to families, the loneliness of people, the impact on the human relations, and so on. And there we think that the concept of human person, it's important in the AI governance, because AI governance ultimately depends on how we understand the human person as well. Huh? So human rights law is built on the principle of human dignity, which assumes that each individual is unique, ethically responsible, and capable of freedoms and relational life. And then, of course, we need to have human-centric approach to AI to ensure that technology serves persons rather to redefining them and preserving human ethical agency and accountability.
So I think this is really important for us to talk about, because this year, G20 USA 2026, one of the 3 focus areas is specifically AI. And so because of that, IF20 is writing a policy paper, which they'll be sending to G20 countries to be able to say many of the principles that you just did. And I hope, Elizabeta, that you'll be part of the contributors to this policy paper as well. We are very excited about many of the principles you talked about in terms of AI governance, making sure that this happens, that AI does not stop human flourishing. And that is something that I think most faith traditions also feel very strongly about as well. So this is kind of a segue into your relationship with IF20. I know that you've been with IF20 since the beginning, and so we would love to hear a little bit about your relationship, being a part of the advisory council, other things and thoughts that you have about the forums and many of the things that you've done with IF20.
Well, I need to say that I was very excited when Professor Koldarum actually invited me to be a member of the advisory council in 2014. And for me, well, as Professor Cole was working in freedom of religion or belief, I was very excited to see, how he's going to have an impact on the global stage through the G20 Interfaith Forum. And I need to say that G20 Interfaith Forum, actually, it developed in a very nice way, in a sense that actually now it embraces in every presidency with the new cultural, historic, political narratives, as well as religious communities. So it became a very diverse and a very enriching organizations in every single sense, from the structural to the, let's say, societal impact that it does. Of course, there is also, it is, let's say, young network, but let's say from 2014 to 2026, so in 12 years, actually developed a lot. Also, what I can witness myself, it was a very nice learning curve also on the personal and professional level. Especially, it was amazing meeting different cultures, especially those which are not traditional ones, because usually if we Google on internet, we will see that there are about 4,200, I don't know how many religions or belief. Basically, in our circulation, let's say on the state level, we are usually talking about maybe 10. So what about the others? And actually, the number of the others is higher than these traditional, let's say, religious communities like churches or religious communities and so on. Not to enter into the belief and philosophical and non-confessional side, because that's also, let's say, big spectrum of organizations that we still are trying to approach in a certain way, that actually we could have holistic approach of freedom of religion and belief. So both, let's say, sides. And for me, that is fascinating, because there are not very many processes which are having courage to bring everybody at the table. You see, always somebody is missing, and then in this field, very often somebody is undermined, or it's not invited, or you see. So, and of course, it's not an easy task because it is very complex field. So it is not just by chance that many secular institutions, they simply reject to deal with freedom of religion and belief. And they reject, rightly so, because it is very complex fundamental right. You see, there is certain complexity that even people who are working 20, 30, 50, 40 years in this field, they also don't know everything because it is such a rich field. And there is so much space for the research and space for deeper understanding and also interconnectivity of all religion and belief organizations, simply to work together with the main focus on protecting human dignity.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for all that you've done with IF20, because you truly have been a leader in what we've been trying to do. You have been a wonderful voice in helping us in terms of what we're talking about, human dignity and freedom of religion and belief. All of those are things that IF20 has been a champion of, but you have been also a voice and a help in this. So thank you for being with us today. We have so appreciated all the things that you have helped us understand, and especially from this whole idea of we all need to understand better what human dignity is and also what freedom of religion belief is, especially for all people. So thank you again for all you've done.
Thanks so much, Mariana, and thank you, Stuart, for inviting me.
Yes. And we hope that our listeners will go on and to the website for Facta es Luz, Human Rights Institute, and see the work that Elizabeta is doing. You can also learn more about Elizabeta's contributions to the IF20. If you go to our YouTube, you will see a recent webinar that she moderated. You will also find other things that she has said at forums and meetings hosted by the IF20. And Dr. Elizabeta, again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Best greetings from Brussels.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us for another episode of the G20 Interfaith Forum podcast.
The podcast provides information and discussions on the G20 Interfaith Forum, but the views expressed are those of the individuals involved and not necessarily the official stance of the forum.
The content is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice or expert recommendations. Listeners should exercise personal responsibility, seek professional guidance, and conduct further research when making decisions based on the podcast.
The information shared may not always reflect the most current developments, and external links or resources are provided for additional information but are not endorsed or controlled by the podcast.
By listening to the podcast, listeners acknowledge and accept these disclaimers. Please be aware that the content of this podcast may be subject to copyright. Unauthorized copy, distribution, and reproduction of any part of the podcast is prohibited.